All righty. Thank you for joining us for our fourth SLiTHER. Our presenter and leader in our discussion today is Caroline Saouma from the University of Utah, who has had the pleasure of moving across the country twice with Jonas when she was in grad school, and preparing her for things like pandemics and other things along those lines. But she's going to tell us a little bit about how she flipped her classroom, and then we'll open it up and have some great discussion. And with that, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Do you see my screen? My PowerPoint screen?
Yep, we're good.
Okay, good. All right, so thanks for giving me the chance to come out here and tell you guys about what I've done over the past 3 years in flipping my inorganic chemistry class. And one of the things that happened, which I did not anticipate, is that I think it really did increase inclusivity and diversity in terms of the number of ACE students and the diverse range of ACE students. And so, of course, now something's frozen. Okay, so before I begin, I just want to share with you the demographics at the University of Utah. And so here I have the fall 2019 enrollment by race and ethnicity. And if we look at just the undergraduates, you can see that we have, some diversity, but by and large, we're about 2/3 white. Our largest minority group is Hispanic and Latinx. In terms of undergrads, it's pretty gender equal, 47% female. You can see only about 76% of them are full-time, so we have a lot of part-time students. And so in Chem 3100, what is this? It's the 1 semester of inorganic chemistry that is required of our majors. It is a 5-credit course. So the standard is 3 or 4 credits. This one is 5 credits, which makes it difficult for the students because there are 4 lectures a week and only 1 discussion a week. And so in a typical semester, I give 50 lectures. There are 8 exam days. There's only actually 4 exams, but each exam, the day before we have a group exam, which serves as sort of a practice exam for them. It forces them to study and see what they know and don't know before the exam. And they have about 14 discussions. Now, when you look at the demographics of my class in fall 2019, at about 60 students, you could see the gender is pretty equal. We had more women than men, but in the past years it's flipped, but it's always about 50%. Most of the students are full-time students, but I have at least 10% which are part-time. Most of them are residents. And in terms of race, about 60% are white, about 30% are domestic students of color, and I have very few international students. And so I've had similar demographics all 3 years I've taught it. Most of the students are seniors. Part of that is because they're intimidated by it being the only 5-credit course. They know it's going to be tough. There's always about 60 students. And so from discussions I've gathered from having a lot of talking to the students, I've come to appreciate that we have a lot of non-traditional students. A lot of them are a little older. A lot of them have families to support. A lot of them are paying for their education themselves. And in Utah, there seems to be a culture of not wanting to take out loans, so they really are paying for it on their own. Many of them are working part-time, if not full-time, on top of trying to be a student. And even though it's not in the demographics that this university collects, we do have quite a few LGBTQ+ students that is represented. And so I just want to share with you the grade distribution over the 3 years and how it changed as I flipped. So the first time I taught the course was in fall 2017, and this was a traditional lecture style course. And so you could see 28% of the students earned an A, 37% had a B. The course GPA was 2.64. But when I looked closely at the students, the top students did not represent diversity in any sense. They were your stereotypical pre-med, pre-grad school students who were able to live on campus and finances were not an issue. They were also all native speakers. And I noticed I had many English learners who were in the B range. And so I knew that there were students, if nothing else, just looking at the native versus non-native speakers, who I believe could be in the A range if the class was taught in a better way. In fall 2018, I did what I would call a soft flip. and I'll describe that a little later. And so the course GPA went up a little bit. I had more A's relative to B, but if you look at the sum of A and B students, it was about the same. But now I started to get diversity in those top students. So I had students who worked, I had minority students earning the A's. And so that I liked. And then this past year, I did a full flip, and you can see how it changed the course grades. So now I had 62% of the students earn A's. My course GPA was 3.25. And so we've all taught several years, and anecdotally, we always say, this class is stronger, this is a weak class. But if you just compare it to similar level courses, so all of our 3,000 level courses in fall 2019, you see that overall there were fewer A's relative to my course. And so these courses include Q&A, quantum, thermo, my course, and biochem. You can see the number of A's. These are the total number of students. So I by far gave out the highest percentage of A's amongst all these other similar level courses. The 3,000 level courses are the top courses for the undergrads in the lecture series. So what did I do to get there? In fall 2017, my approach was to just be super organized. I had required materials. I had the textbook, which is about $120, is Miesler, Fisher, and Tarr, and Top Hat, which I believe was about $25. I don't remember. We had our university had a discount with them. And this was not ideal. I didn't appreciate this at the time, but in talking to the students, I realized, not all students can afford this. And moreover, even though the texts were on reserve, they would go missing. So the library didn't do a very good job of making sure that they stay there. I mean, I had students take the textbooks from reserve and bring them to my office to show me things. That's how loose it was regulated. I had a very traditional lecture. So I provided for the students online before class lecture notes, which were partially filled out so they can print them and fill them out. And I always provided what I call inked notes after lecture. So all of my notes were available to them. And again, this was not very good for inclusivity, in that not all the students could access a printer the morning of class. So it was the first time I was teaching, it was kind of last minute. In class, many students opted to listen and not take notes. And while some people can learn this way, I think by and large, most people need to be writing or doing something to really learn. And there was a huge disconnect between the lecture and the problem sets. So many students had to rely on office hours or reading the textbook. And so there was a disconnect. It was challenging. There was some good that came out of this though. So the students really appreciated the annotated notes. And I found that if I printed the notes and brought them to class, students would pick them up and use them. So I realized I need to prepare things for them. In terms of an interactive component in class, all I had was one or two clicker questions using Top Hat. We used Top Hat because I know like the OChem and the Gen Chem used it, and so they were familiar with it, and we had the discounts. I really found nothing good out of using these clicker questions in class. Students were distracted with their phones afterwards. They'd be paying attention. We had a clicker question, then suddenly they were on their phones and no longer paying attention. And there's a huge fear of missing out on participation points and a lot of stress and anxiety, even though they were just participation grades. I would say my office hours were semi-limited in that when I was setting them up, I didn't appreciate that not all students lived on campus and can come to office hours during, the 9 to 5 time, or maybe a little bit earlier or after. And so I think in assuming that students had a flexible schedule, this was unfortunate because I didn't appreciate that some students could not come to office hours because of their job and their family lives. And because there's a disconnect between the lecture and the problem sets, it put those students at a disadvantage. Other things that I did, which I think was good, so I did organize the course on Microsoft OneNote, and I'll show you what I did shortly. This had, I think, a huge benefit once the students were familiar with it. It's very organized, easy to follow. It's available offline. And so as soon as it syncs on your device, all of the notes and everything is available. So if you're on an airplane, off to a med school visit, you can still see all of the course material. If you're on the bus coming to school, you could still see all of the course material. And this contrasts with Canvas, which is our LMS, where you have to be online. OneNote is free if you have the Office 365 subscription. It's available on computers, tablets, your phone, everywhere. So it's just accessible as much as it can be. The way I present it, it's meant so that the students could, if they have a tablet, fill in notes and annotate in their OneNote notebook, but everything is presented as a PDF so that students can print things if they are very much paper oriented. For myself, it's very easy to go in and modify things. So if I make mistakes or need to add something, and moreover, it can interface with your LMS if you have a class notebook, so you can actually create assignments in OneNote, and you can have the students submit their homework in OneNote. You can lock the pages, you can grade it in there, and then it will update your LMS. And a big thing was not being locked out of Canvas. Every year I have 2 or 3 students come to me, email me in a frantic frenzy about how they are late in turning in their problem set, and please accept this problem set via email because I can't get into Canvas because I lost my phone, my battery charger's dead, the Duo push isn't working, so on and so forth. Now, as I was teaching this course, I appreciated that 4 lectures a week is challenging. It's like taking a class over the summer. And I also appreciated the students were not on top of their problem sets. Like they weren't working the problem sets every day because they didn't have time to. They were just working on them on the weekend. And so I started to make videos for MO theory and the spectroscopy units. And that is when I realized how not inclusive my class was. In doing this, you know, the videos are nice, they're accessible to all. But what I saw the first year, the Microsoft platform I was hosting it on, I could actually see who was watching them and how much time they were spending on each slide of the PowerPoint presentation. And immediately after class, it was all the English learners were watching it first. And that was, again, that's when I realized how my class was not inclusive. And then later on, a lot of other students would come to watch it. Oftentimes they'd only watch 5 or 10 minutes. I think as they were working on the problem set, you know, something didn't just quite make sense in lecture, and so they would just watch these videos basically of me lecturing. And the students really, really appreciated this. The course feedback was more videos. And so now let me just show you what I did in OneNote. And so in OneNote, I have a class notebook. And so here I have, so in the class notebook, you have collaboration space, which is pages that everyone can modify in the class. You can assign certain subpages. So when the students worked in groups, for example, Team Lippard, only certain students could access Team Lippard or Team Raymond. You know, pets of Chem 3100, everyone could, and people started to post pictures of their pets. There is the content library, which for the students is read only, but for the teacher it's read and write. And in the class notebook, each student has their own created notebook, and they enter this notebook through the LMS for the first time, and it creates the notebook. What I don't like is that the teachers can see the notebook, so I always feel like I'm spying on the students. So I tell them I can see their notebooks up front, and so they don't have to use the notebooks. A lot of them don't. But what they do is in the content library, they can see all the material, and then they can copy the pages to their own notebook within the class or their own separate notebook outside of the class if they don't want me to see it. What's nice though is I can have assignments and then have them upload their assignment in their individual notebooks. These are just the TAs. I took off all the other students. So I could have a problem set, I can create it, and so it has to go into this problem set page, and then it locks it at the due date. So you can easily grade it, annotate it, and then grade within OneNote, and it automatically interfaces with Canvas. All of my lectures have a page. So for example, here we're on lecture 16. And so you can see I have the date, the required problem set questions. So P-set 4, it's hyperlinked. So if I hit P-set 4, it takes me to the P-set page. Links to the videos for when the class is flipped. Now I have these interactive questions embedded in it, and so if they have internet issues, they can just click on them here. Here, there's the empty lecture notes where they can fill in, so they can copy this. If they prefer to use another program on their computers, there's the lecture notes as a PDF. They can open and copy it. Rocketbook lecture notes just has the Rocketbook banner, so if they want to write notes but then upload it, they can easily do so. And then I have additional resources for them and recommended reading. Then there's the inked, which is exactly the same thing, except now I have my annotated notes right in here. And so everything in here is hyperlinked, and so they can see everything they need within this page. Okay, and so when I was reevaluating, how I did in 2017, I realized the required materials is not good for inclusivity. The traditional lectures did not really work. The interactive components, the way I was doing it, was not good. Office hours being somewhat limited, also not ideal. But I did like, and the students appreciate, the course organization, as well as the videos. And so those were 2 pluses. In terms of getting to know the students in my class of 60, I was a little limited. I got to know those who could come to office hours. So not all the students were able to come to office hours. But I also did a Voices of Inorganic Chemistry extra credits. So those videos that are available, and I know they're on the Ionic Viper website, I would have them watch them for extra credit and just write a 1-page essay on how it made them feel, their response. It was very open-ended. I just didn't want them to give me a summary of the chemistry. And this is how I got to know the students, and also made me realize that I can message students through Canvas. So I had many discussions with students in this platform, because they would open up to me and say, oh, I didn't realize Dick Schrock didn't start out at a top school and he went to state school just like me. I didn't realize, you could still be great coming from a state school. Or they would tell me about what they want to do in their futures, and I could help connect them to resources. And so that was a big plus. So then in 2018, I decided to flip my class based on some of the feedback I had from the students. I still required Top Hat because I didn't know how to do clicker questions otherwise, but I got rid of the textbook. So there's still a cost associated, but it was less. The course was still organized in Microsoft OneNote, which had the same benefits. Now there's a flipped lecture, so they had to watch the video before, and at the end, they had the chance to go into Top Hat and fill out a muddiest point so that, I know what they understood and didn't understand. So the videos were on Microsoft Stream, which is nice because they could watch it at different speeds. They also could download the PowerPoint show. So again, if they had limited internet access, they could see, they could still watch it. So like if they're on the bus coming to school. However, about 50% of them watched the video, which was surprising. I had more video views the year before than I did this year. And putting the muddiest point on Top Hat, I had really poor response. I think because after they watched the video, they had to open up a web browser, go to Top Hat. And I made it anonymous to try to encourage more students to fill this out, but it made it difficult because if a student had something they were struggling with, I couldn't connect with them in class or email them to clarify things. Now, the interactive component was just all clicker questions in class. So I was teaching in a traditional lecture hall. I had very limited TA support. And so it was clicker questions, and then I try to have them work on the problem sets in groups. And at that point, most of the students just left because it's difficult to work in groups in a lecture hall with the tiny seats. It just didn't work. And so what I did was I would take the problem set questions and convert them to clicker format. So each question would be split up into like 5 clicker questions, so it would walk through them. This was challenging though, because the groups were self-selected groups. So you had your overachievers in one corner, you had students who were struggling in another corner, students who didn't know anyone who were just kind of on their own until you forced them to join a group. It was very difficult to manage time for responses. And again, I was in a lecture hall with no TA support, so it was not ideal. However, there was a lot less of a disconnect with the problem set, and this resulted in overall lower attendance at office hours, which I viewed as a positive because it meant that students didn't need the office hours as they did before. And it also led to more questions in class. And so one thing I did was I got this cue ball, which I saw in Shark Tank, which is basically a dodgeball speaker. And so you would throw it to the students and then they could speak and their voices would project. And this actually saved, the students started to like it. And it meant that you could actually hear the questions. You didn't have to repeat the question. Everyone in the class could hear it. And as soon as the dodgeball went out, suddenly a lot of other students had questions. So they liked it, and I think it just allowed them to have a voice. To get to know the students, I did the same thing as before, but I started to have individual notes to students after exams of encouragement. So when I'd upload their grades, and the students told me this made a huge impact on them in staying motivated throughout the semester. And so overall, I got to know most of the students through the essays that they would write and in class because I could walk around a little bit more. And then towards the end, we started to discuss things like mental health, discrimination, and harassment. And this wasn't the first thing I wanted to do. It wasn't on my mind that I should talk about this. But unfortunately, in the fall of 2018, we had a pretty horrendous murder on campus of a student, and it really impacted everyone. And so it was on people's minds, and I felt I needed to do my part to try to empower the students, make them realize mental health resources are there, and that discrimination does happen. Let's not pretend it doesn't. It sucks. You shouldn't put up with it. And I, going into this, I had no idea what I was doing. I was scared to do it. But there, people told me I was the first professor who they thought cared. As a result of this, I know some students ended up going to mental health. I mean, they would tell me their problems, and I was amazed that they were able to keep composure with all that was going on in their lives. I also learned that it was a 3-month wait list to get into the counseling center on campus. But overall, it was a positive response from the students. And I also designed the exams to be for less anxiety. And so the students would always complain to me that the exams were too long. And so I didn't think they were too long. I mean, maybe there's one exception where it was. And so I just started to add another question to the exam. And so the exams would be out of 120 points, but graded out of 100. And so I now made the exams longer, but the students did better because there's less anxiety. And so now it was more of a pick and choose. So if they absolutely panicked, forgot something, it didn't mean that they could not get an A. And in the group exams, I started to let them choose their group because before they would show up, pick candy out of a bowl, and that would dictate their group. And that caused a lot of anxiety because they didn't know their peers. So they didn't know who they'd be working with. And so now the top students, again, I don't have formal demographics, but I can say, from the students I talked to, the top students now included English learners, students who worked, and there was diversity in as much as there was diversity in my class who were in that A range. And so that was all very encouraging, but there was room for improvement. And so after the class was over, I had these study sessions where I invited students to give me feedback. And I told the students they can invite anyone, but I really wanted to get to the students who I know were trying and cared, whether they were A students or C students. And so I had students who, in all ranges of the scores, to provide me feedback. And they basically told me I need better TAs. I basically had no TAs, and the ones I had were horrible that semester. I need a better classroom. They said assigning groups is good, and then I should have the groups rotate so they get to know more people. They wanted me to encourage them more, so when I started making those notes at the end of after exams, they really, really liked that. Again, they told me that I was the only professor who ever did this, and it was so simple and it had such an impact on them. Easy to do. And they told me I should be more human, tell them more stories about my past just to be more relatable, because I was more relatable in office hours, and so those students knew this side of me, but in class I wasn't so relatable. And they hated the clickers. They just wanted more problem set working. Again, goes hand in hand with a better classroom. And so last fall, I really got lucky in that I feel like everything aligned. And so now I had no required materials. The course was still organized in Microsoft OneNote. All clicker questions were on Microsoft Forms, but actually we didn't do clickers in class. So these were the embedded questions, which I'll get to in a second. On day one, I told the students, and I was talking about my past, how I have ADHD, and that was huge. I think 4 or 5 students out of 60 came up to me afterwards and were like, wow, it's great to know that you can have a learning disability and still be successful. They thanked me for sharing that with them. And that's when I realized, okay, being more relatable has a huge impact on them, making them realize that I'm not on a pedestal. So now the flipped lecture was just like it was before. They would watch the video before. The videos, I would just make them in PowerPoint, nothing fancy. You can see here, in PowerPoint you can make them. You can record your slideshow, which is how I did it. I would just annotate the slides. You could publish to Microsoft Stream or save as a show. So I would save as a show so they could see it. And then I'd publish it to Microsoft Stream, which is nice because it's only accessible to people at your university. So I don't publish to YouTube because I'm scared of copyright infringement issues. And then you can embed forms, so your questions, your clicker style questions, into the PowerPoint. So as they're watching the video, they can have questions where they have to answer. So you embed these interactive questions. And now I put the muddiest point at the very end of the video, and this gave me much more response with the muddiest point because it was right there and it prompted them to start right away. And so in Microsoft Stream, this is what it might look like. I created a channel, which is the Chem 3100 lectures. So all the videos are here, and you can see all the videos, the lectures are listed. Here's what it looks like when you open up one of the videos. As you can see, it's just the PowerPoint that I'm annotating, and it does create subtitles. The students tell me they're quite funny because they're obviously not chemists. Here's the transcript. In Microsoft Stream, you can also add Microsoft form questions. And so the only thing is if you embed a Microsoft form question in your PowerPoint presentation and then upload it to Microsoft Stream, the students cannot interact with it. And so you have to add it in here. But it's very straightforward. You just click on interactivity, and then you just put in your form, and you can say at what time point you want it. And so the interactive questions, I guess this didn't come through. So the interactive questions, I just put them in Microsoft Forms. And so here's an example. So it didn't copy into there, but you would have, let's see, preview what it's like. And so here, there's a question where, we're coming up with a reducible representation for the 4 hydrogens in methane. And so the first question is, what is the character that corresponds when you apply C3? So they can choose, and so say they choose wrong. You can have it branch. So now it's, let's try again. And now I gave them a hint by drawing it in so they could hopefully see now more clearly the C3 axis and how it would change. So then they do this, and then it goes to the next question. And so what's nice is you can have this branching option. You can decide if the students can only submit during a certain time, how many submissions they can do, and they don't need to log in every single time because it's through, they log in with their student accounts to the Microsoft platform, so it automatically collects their name and information unless you decide to make it anonymous. And so you can grade it from that. And then at the end, there's the muddiest points, and I got much more response. And so here's just some of it. Now it's no longer anonymous, but I did this on purpose because now, when a student tells me something like this, I know who they are. And so in class, I can go to them directly or have one of the TAs go to them directly with the answer to their questions. And if a lot of the students had the same muddiest points, I would give a 5 or 10 minute lecture at the beginning of class describing that muddiest point. A lot of times they would ask me to go over just one of the questions that were embedded they struggled with. And so that's how we would start our classes. I was lucky in that now I had an appropriate classroom. So we have a new science center, and as you can see, it's designed with these tables that we can move. So we would put them in groups of 6. Each group had a whiteboard. They also could have their own dedicated monitor if they wanted. And we had markers, so each group had a set of markers and erasers. And you can see here, this is in a class they didn't erase. This is the MO diagram of NO that they built together. And so this was really nice. Here you can see this is how the class might go. They just worked on the problem sets. And so you can see here I am talking with this group here. I have a TA standing here at a board with another student. I don't know where, here's another TA back there. So it's very interactive. We get up and move around. In class, they're in groups of 6. They work on the problem set. The problem set is graded on completion. There's a problem of the week, which is graded on correctness, which they're not allowed to work on in class unless they're done with the problem set. The problem set could be an activity. So for example, one day, they did, I had these octahedron, which were color coded, and then they had it was like a competition. They had 6 or 7 different point groups, and they had to get it all right as a team, and then they'd win a prize if they got it. And so it was an activity, but it was embedded in the problem set because it'd be like, what's the point group of, the green one with two sides shaded next to one another. In general, we had 4 instructors and 10 groups. So instructors, me, and 3 TAs or LAs. And we did things even like concept mapping, where they would, at the end of the week, go over, there'd be a list of things they learned about, and then they would decide how they're related. Are they an answer or a tool? So this is just one group's concept map. Here's another group's concept map. And this really helped them see how things came together into one big cohesive story. I also started using Rocketbook for uploading things. And so what I found for the problem set is, again, if I give them something that they can print out, they'll do it. And so the problem sets look something like this on the first page. They're color coded based on what lecture we're going to be working on them. And then each page has one problem on it. And what's nice about this is the students can then just select one of these down here. They can easily scan it all. And then the Rocketbook app compiles it into one PDF that's already been optimized and sends it to wherever they decided that, ticking this box here should send it. So they can email it to themselves, they can send it to a OneNote notebook, they can send it to OneDrive, wherever they want to. And so this just made it a lot easier for students. They came to class prepared. I offered to print if students didn't have access to printer. No one took me up on that. So they all had a printer or were working on their tablets. What else? So again, I just continue to try to get to know the students through individual notes and essays, especially after exams, especially if they didn't do well. If I see students outside of class, I would talk to them. Before class, I would chat with them, as we're waiting for everyone to arrive. What I found, though, is students would show up to class and immediately start working on the problem set, which was really rewarding. Sometimes they got sick of working on problem sets, especially on Friday, and they would just go off and talk about whatever. And, I encourage them to work on the problem set because we're here to help them. But if they want to talk about whatever, I'm fine with that. I also had a diverse set of TAs in LA. So last year I had a total of 5. I had, men and women. I had LDS, Jewish, Muslim, an atheist. And so I did my best to just get a diverse group of TAs, which I think went really well. We started having remote office hours because I realized not all students have access to be able to come to campus. And we also discussed mental health and discrimination harassment a lot more. So we talked about imposter syndrome, gender wage gap. Before the first test, we discussed power poses and how it actually changes the amount of testosterone in your spit. And the students really liked this. And what I found was that, when I was walking around, when I would walk around and the students weren't on task, oftentimes they were discussing these sorts of issues that is still part of the bigger picture of being a scientist. And so if I had a student who was taking an economics class, that's where, gender wage gap came up. And I had no tolerance for any students discriminating against others or saying no, can I join your group for an exam or anything. And overall, students really rose to the challenge. The class was hard. After the first exam, they did really well, but not all students did well. And so I wanted to make sure to acknowledge the students who did really well, but also let the students who didn't do well that they can improve. So as you can see, there's a lot more A's, and there are a lot of rewarding sub-stories. There's one student, it was the third time she was taking the class with me, used to never show up to class. Once I had this flipped classroom, she started to show up to class. She was very engaged with her group, and from being a student who had to fail twice, she was an A student. This happened with another student as well. I became a lot more comfortable if I noticed a student was no longer showing up to class, reaching out to them to see if they needed help and to connect them with resources. Because it was fully flipped and I was working with all the groups, I actually could keep track of who was in class if suddenly someone wasn't there. And you know, this isn't just the flipped, I changed how I teach. And since I was a part of the Ionic Viper cohort, I have COPUS data on the past 2 years. And so when it was what I would call the soft flip, which is represented here, I had a very didactic teaching style. You could see the students were receiving a lot of information. I was presenting, I was guiding them, but it wasn't much down here where I wanted it to be. And then this year, it was very much a student-centered, where the students were working and I was really guiding them. The one day that was different, shown here, that's one day where I was in a traditional lecture hall where I could not get into the nice classroom for the flipped approach. And so overall, the students have taught me a lot, but there's still a lot of room for improvement. I think the way I've formatted my class has really helped with inclusivity and making sure that there's diversity amongst the top scores in as much as there can be given my class demographics. Moving forward, one thing is I learned that we have a bias reporting page on our campus, which isn't the same as reporting harassment, but it could be a more minor offense. And so I think I'm going to make sure that the students know of this, that if anything comes up, if I say something that they think is inappropriate or one of their peers, that they can go and report it. I want to talk more about some of these social equality issues because that was well received. Discuss some de-escalation strategies with them because, again, as much as we wish that science was perfect, it's not. We still have many issues. And I want to give them more opportunities for them to share and discuss, you know, their stories if they want to. Have some more interactive problem sets. And we're going to communicate via Microsoft Teams. And so this is basically this is also where we're going to have all of our videos. But what I realized is students hate email. They don't read email. They want to communicate by text. And so they would text the TAs questions. And I told the TAs as soon as I found out this was happening that they then have to put their phone numbers on the course website because it's not fair that only some of the students happen to have their phone number because they're in the same chemistry club or something like that. And so they really like texting. So through Microsoft Teams, they can text. It seems to be more accessible for them. And just to make sure, I always let students come to your office no matter what. You never know why they're coming. And so, you know, you should never turn them away. And if they just want extra help and it's not office hours, only then turn them away. Going online, we're going to basically replicate what I did using Microsoft Teams and really encourage the use of Rocketbook for non-tablet users. And so in Microsoft Teams, I'll just show you, it can again integrate in the whole Microsoft platform, but I had the chance to try this out over the summer. And so you can create a team. So this is Access was a class. So there's the general where you can have, this is where we would have all of our meetings and any discussions. All the files pertinent to the class can be shared up here. The videos, this is just the Microsoft Stream pages for the videos here. It's a little slow. And then you can have your little groups working. And what I like about this is that each group can share a chat, which doesn't disappear as soon as the meeting ends. They can share files. They can have whiteboards created. It's a lot more interactive. The students can initiate their own videos, and they can also just have standard chat videos with their own groups of peers. So it's a lot easier overall relative to trying to use Zoom and something else. And I just want to end by saying, you know, support is the key. I learned a lot from this community. Cynthia First is the one who really got me thinking about flipping my class when she put on a workshop and provided me funds for some equipment. Jeff Statler in our department, who assigns all the TAs, was really supportive and encouraging. So is David Roberts in getting that other room equipped for what I wanted. We have a Center for Teaching and Learning Excellence that have a lot of great resources on inclusive teaching. And we also have a monthly lunch series to discuss inclusivity in the classroom, where I've learned a lot. I started attending it last year. We have an LA program, and if your university does not, I'd encourage you to try to check it out and convince them to have it. It's basically learning assistance. It started at the University of Colorado, and it's to have basically peers help teach peers. It's low pressure because the LAs don't grade, and so the idea is that the students are more comfortable talking to them. I've learned a ton from former students and TAs, and friends and colleagues at other universities. And if I need all the support, so do the students. And so I've learned really you just have to support the students and really listen to them and their issues that they may be having with the class or in their lives. So that was what I had. Sorry, that went a little long.
Oh, that's okay. That was great. Do we have any questions or comments?
I have a question. This is Tasha from your university.
Hello.
Hello. I was wondering, so it sounds like you do like an end of the semester assessment for your students to kind of figure out like what do they want help, or what suggestions do they have? Is that correct? Yes.
Well,
go ahead. I was just gonna say, have you ever thought of doing one like mid-semester, like after the first exam?
I did the first year, and it went horribly because the students wanted me to change things like very, very drastically, like things that are not reasonable, right? And when I couldn't do this, they were just like, you're not listening to me. And so I think moving forward, especially now with everything online, I will have more chances. They do use the muddiest points also to give me some feedback, but I will encourage it more and then make sure that they realize that, I'm not going to change the day of the exams or change the number of exams. That's in the syllabus. With things moving forward, though, I will have a note in my syllabus that if there are any changes, it would be after the class discusses it and kind of votes on it. But yeah, after the first year, I was scared of doing it again.
Yeah, I think with all the changes you've made, I don't think they'll be super drastic anymore. It'll probably be like subtle little.
Yeah.
I just figured in my like general chemistry class, they appreciate it, like, and when they see you make those like subtle changes that they suggested, they like just helps build rapport. So, but it sounds like you're doing for that anyway.
I will say, anytime a student, like if I ever hear a student complaining, I will invite them to come to my office and share their grievances with me. And so I'm like listening to their complaints, and I'm like, okay, well, this is what I can do or can't do, right? So even if they're just talking trash about me, I'm just going to let that go and give them the chance to express to me why they're frustrated. And I think that's helped, but that's not on a, in front of the whole class scale, just smaller scale.
Matthew's got a question for you.
Unshare my screen.
I took care of it. Don't worry.
Okay.
Superpowers.
Thank you very much for the talk. I had a question about how did you introduce kind of the social issues? Did you just blatantly say, we're going to talk about this? I think that would be, I think that's really important. And I struggle with that when things are happening in the world. And I'm like, how can I bring that in not like a forced way? So I thought maybe as a group, I don't know, are there any learning outcomes on Viper? I haven't seen any that kind of bring that up, but I would love to hear how you did that.
So for us, it started when we had this horrible murder on campus. And I felt like I had to share things because I realized how oblivious we are. So I would even talk about just personal safety, right? And I would talk about examples of both men and women who I know got themselves in unsafe situations, and people were like wide-eyed. I had no idea this actually happens in the world. And, thinking back to when I was an undergrad and what I thought about, chemistry and diversity, and of course there's no sexual harassment anymore. I just felt it important. And so sometimes it might be like, here's a CNE article. I was lucky that first year that gave me the strength to start talking about it. I do think it's a little awkward But having them work in groups now makes it easier, because if you want them to share anything with one another, it's not that they're sharing from the whole class or to me. It is something I still struggle with, though, so if other people have suggestions, yeah.
Joanne?
I have a question. You said when you first started, you know, in the middle course, about half the students watched the videos. And then I wondered, did everybody watch them in the third iteration? And was it because of the embedded questions, or do you have a sense of that?
More students watch them. It's never going to be 100%. I was told if you can get to about 70 to 80%, you're doing it right. They held each other accountable because they're in their little groups. And so, you know, I'd walk around and they'd be like, well, had you watched the video, you would know she said this. And early on, the groups, I let them self-select initially because I didn't, you know, let them be comfortable. But then after the first exam, I set the groups. And so I would rank the students. And so, you know, I had 60 students. So number 1, 11, 21, 31, 41, and 51 were in a group. So you had students who were along the whole spectrum. And they really helped each other. They never figured out how I did this, which I guess is good, but they helped encourage each other. And what I found was a lot of students doing this, they would then connect with each other outside of class, you know, share phone numbers to set up study groups. And these are students who, you know, I'd say the top students and the bottom students. Whereas before they would just sit down with their friends. And I felt like a lot of times it was your friends who never watched the video too, so you would just complain, or your friends who all watched the video. And so now they were forced to integrate. And I think they held each other accountable. And so they came a lot more prepared.
Abby.
Hi, Carolyn. Good talk. I have two questions. If you could talk a little bit more about how you use the Rocketbook for the students that didn't have a tablet for like problem solving, because that's one thing that I'm grappling with in terms of the upcoming semester.
Yeah.
And then I lost the other thought, so I'll just leave it at that for right now. And if it comes back, I might send a message.
Okay. Yeah, so Rocketbook, the app is free. And so I started using it because they would upload their assignments and it was horrible. You know, there'd be like light shining, you can't see it, they'd be upside down, it was a mess. And you tell them use an app like CamScan or something that optimizes, they wouldn't do it. And so Rocketbook just automatically does it. They liked it. And so what you can do is they have the Rocketbook blank pages. Like if you have the app, which is free, you can go to a link and get just the blank pages. And what I would do is I would set that as a background, either in Microsoft Word or in Adobe, like set it as a watermark or something so they can have that boundary. And so things, even in class, if I ever had to give stuff out, so like in the discussion sections, they had actual worksheets, it was all in this Rocketbook so they can quickly upload it. Moving forward, again, it's just easy because they can quickly scan a picture that's been optimized and share. So we're going to use Microsoft Teams. It's really easy to just upload and share something right away. They also, if you look at Rocketbook, if you Google Rocketbook live casting, they have it set up so that if you have like your camera or something, you know, above, and it basically, it's above the Rocketbook page. And as you write, it takes a picture as often as you want it to, and it uploads that picture to a website, right? So if you share your screen or share that website link, people can see. And so it's not smooth, but you can show everyone. And I think from what I've seen with the Rocketbook, it's much more readable and higher quality than when they just randomly take a picture of something. And so that's my plan moving forward, to really try to encourage them to do that or to use it.
I thought of the other thing. The other question was for your videos. It looks like they were a traditional length long. Did you break them up into small chunks, or did you keep them all like a traditional length class period, or were there mixed?
I see, yeah. So they were a little shorter than the class period. I break it up by having those questions embedded. And so I was told, you know, make videos 5 to 10 minutes. But then when I was asking students in this feedback, I was like, would you rather watch 3 videos or just click something once? And they said, click something once. And so I think having the clicker questions embedded helps. The other thing is they look long, but they're not actually that long. And so what I do is, you know, for example, we're building the MO diagram of something. Let's get the reducible representation. I'll either set it up as a clicker question, how to get it, like you saw part of that. And if they got it right or they feel comfortable, they can basically skip the next 10 minutes, because the next 10 minutes is me really walking it through for the students who don't understand. And the students know this because the background is shaded. So if the background of the PowerPoint slide is shaded, that means they can skip. And so usually they're about 20 to 30 minutes, which I think is still on the long side, but most of the lectures, they're going through a problem. So it's not just, you know, here's an MO diagram, this is how you do it, but we're not doing it. And so that way it can shorten it quite a bit. And especially if they download the PowerPoint presentation, it's easy to skip ahead. In Microsoft Stream, you know, they just have to move the cursor ahead. Also, most students watch it at like 1.2 speed or 1.5. And so it is faster.
Thanks.
Yeah.
All right. Do we have any other questions or comments? We do welcome comments. People that have experience in this field want to add their own expertise.
So one thing that Carolyn mentioned was that the TAs, you know, would text. I set up a class group me at the beginning of the semester, and I set up like a bit.ly in my syllabus, and then they can sign up. And students tend to ask questions that way. The nice thing about it is if they text a question, then everyone sees it. And so then I can answer a question for everyone that someone may not feel comfortable asking. That's one thing that I thought was related to what.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good idea. And that's one of the things with Microsoft Teams going forward is we're going to set up a channel just of the learning team where they can send messages, so we'll all see it and we can all respond in real time or not. I just found that, you know, they just love their phones, and I was like, how do you, like, I was, you know, for me, they send me something and then I want to like write or annotate or reply. I can't do that on my phone, you know, and so this way it's on their phone, it's a texting app, you're not disclosing your personal cell phone number, and hopefully they appreciate it. One thing my colleagues pointed out to me is in our LMS Canvas, there is a chat option, but it doesn't refresh automatically. And so the only way it refreshes is if you hit refresh. And so like if in class there's a discussion, they have to constantly hit refresh. And so, yeah. I was thinking of even adding an Instagram page or a Twitter account, just with, you know, they really struggle with symmetry. So if I see something symmetric, take a picture, you know, it's the point group, kind of walk them through it. I think at least our students are more on Instagram than Twitter, but I thought that might be something to do. I don't know.
I did that. I can tell you it worked really well. This was for an upper level course that I had a weekly assignment where they set up like a professional Twitter handle, like, and then they would find an article and comment on it. And we'd start every class talking about some like important thing that was happening related to either green chemistry or inorganic chemistry. It was fun.
Yeah. Was it a closed group or was it open? Like, could I go to Twitter and find this?
Well, you can find that. Yeah, I set up a hashtag for it. Okay. So they would just have to hashtag it, and then I integrated it into my LMS. And so it would be linked to our discussion board. And so I could grade on the discussion board on what they were posting. And
that was with Twitter?
Yep. I have Canvas too, so I think something you might be able to do. Although, yes, I agree with you. It's very cumbersome to, your stuff's so nice and team. Whatever you set up, I'm jealous.
Well, I'm happy to show anyone how I did it. It's not that hard. It's a little intimidating the first time, but once you know what you're doing, it's really straightforward. But I think, yeah, going back to, you know, how do you introduce social issues? Like, chemists are all over Twitter and incorporating the social issues on it. And so I think that's a way to maybe introduce it, is if there is, you know, if the class has like a Twitter handle or something and you repost, you know, I think that's a way to introduce it. That is something though I'm struggling with, is thinking how to make some of these issues not feel forced, but it's also something I feel strongly about that they need to be aware of.
And just in case you were to get 14 or 15 people saying, yes, can you show me how to do this? This absolutely could be an LO of how to set up something like this on Viper, where it could be just shared with the community, because I'm sure a lot of people would be interested in that. It's not a traditional form of LO, but it would absolutely be useful.
Yeah. How would I do that? Just record myself as I do it, or the easiest way?
I think that would work if you just, you know,
Okay.
kind of recorded yourself as you worked through something on the screen, and then we made it a web application kind of thing. LO. Yeah, we can certainly chat about getting that in the right form, but you know, basically,
Yeah.
don't do
That,
the
or I mean,
same
if, you
thing
know,
5 times.
exactly. Like if it's like, you know, hey, I'm going to do this afternoon. Feel free to, you know, text me. Let's all work on this afternoon. You know, we're all working on our classes.
Yeah.
Let's discuss, share. I think could be a good approach too.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So.
All right. Well, great. We had some really great discussion, some interesting thing. Any final questions, comments? Again, I've been popping some feedback form into the chat here, so if everyone could take a minute, I'll give the link one more time. We certainly welcome and love the feedback. Let me just announce that we're going to have another one of these next week. Carrie Stone and Anthony Fernandez are going to lead it. The topic is forming. I think I will best describe it now as, what does Viper have that might be able to help you out with that one topic you hate presenting in class? So the feedback form this week is asking for a little bit of reflection on that in terms of what we might be talking about next week. I think the plan is we'll do one more the week after that, and then we're probably going to shift to doing these bi-weekly once semesters start hitting. The community's been very receptive to them, so we do envision continuing to do these, but every week might be a little bit much once the storm hits. So, all right, well, I'm going to end the recording now.